My great-uncle, Owen Neal, was born in 1874 to Elsie Melvina and William Charles Neal. My earliest record of him was a census in 1880. He was with the family in Irishtown near Carlisle Lake. He was 6 years old. Later, of course, he enlisted in the Army in 1898. It says Air Force, but it ended up being the Army. And his unit was the Battery B, 1st Regiment of Artillery. On the application for a gravestone, his discharge date was only, and it was honorable, was only about 4 months after he enlisted. I didn't understand why only 4.5 months, so I looked up the history of the time. The Spanish-American War began June 2, 1898. It was part of a broader conflict that included troops in Puerto Rico and in Cuba. This war led to Spain losing all of its colonial possessions in the Pacific and in North and South America. The war lasted 113 days, and when it was over, the U.S. troops were mustered out or discharged. The Illinois Light Artillery Battery A was raised during the Spanish-American War. Owen was mustered to service in Springfield, Illinois. The men had 4 officers, and there were 120 men. 1 week later, they were ordered to Camp Thomas in Georgia. That camp was on the former Civil War battlefield at Chickamauga. There, Owen was assigned to the Light Artillery Brigade and sent to Newport News, Virginia. He arrived July 26. 2 days later, he was bound for Puerto Rico. They stayed there for less than a month. Then he was sent to New York City, arriving September 13. His battery then arrived in Danville, Illinois, and they were given 60 days of furlough. On coming back November 25th, the men were discharged. The war ended and the signing of the Treaty of Paris. That was the end of the war, 12/10/1898. I thought it was pretty odd that there was no boot camp or any training. Anyway, then we push on. The census of 1900, Owen was 26 years old and living with his mom and dad and family. He was a coal miner at that time, and that was in Central City, Kentucky. He was single. His brothers Emmett, David, Monroe, my grandfather, all those brothers were all living at the same house, and all were coal miners. By 1900, they could all read and write, which at that time was a huge plus. In the 1910 census, he was married to Flora for 1 year. He lived in Mount Olive, Macoupin County, Illinois, and he was a machinist for the coal mine because the occupation said miner. On the census, he was 35 and Flora was 18, and it shows that they were married for 1 year. So he married Flora when he was 34 and she was only 17. His mother, my great-grandmother, Elsie Melvina Hinchy Neal, lived with them, and she was only 61 years old, and it showed that she was a widow. That was the 1910 census. Now we go to the 1920 census, living in Sawyerville. In 1920, Owen was 46, and now his wife's name is Pansy. This name change was what drew me to Owen and his wife Flora. By 1920, they had been married for 11 years and had 2 children, Pansy, 9 years old, and Thelma, 4 years old, 8 months. It shows him as a coal miner. By the 1930 census, Owen was 56 and his wife's name was back to Flora, although the person who wrote the information down on the census named her Nora Francis. Thelma was the only daughter at home. In the 1940 census, their name was O'Neill, and his wife's name was Pansy. Then I realized Flora must have liked pansies. Get it, Flora? pansy. By the 1950 census, Owen was 76 and Flora was 58. Owen died in 1963. It says that when Owen died he was 84, but my math says he was 89. Flora died in 1967. I don't know why his nickname was the Judge. The Staunton Memorial Cemetery has what I think is an odd custom, or policy. The back and front of the gravestones and markers are used. My mother was approached many years after my father had died by the people in charge of the cemetery. She was informed that a woman wanted to bury her husband on the other side of my father and use the back of the tombstone. She paid my mom for half of the stone. Mom didn't like it, but that is the policy of this particular cemetery. Flora and Owen and her son-in-law and granddaughter share the memorial on their side. Great Aunt Jenny Lambert and her husband are on the other side. Owen's daughter Thelma was my first cousin once removed. She married John Neal Admire. He received his doctorate in education, hence doctor on the memorial. He had an illustrious career. One interesting chapter in his life was when he served as the president of Lewis and Clark Community College for 9 years, from 1983 to 1992. When my father's Uncle Owen died, my father was 41 years old. We had never heard of any of his aunts or uncles, and most lived in the area. So many rabbit holes, so little time.